The cruelest thing a man can do on his wedding night is not raise his voice, not slam a door, not even walk away, but make a woman understand that she was never meant to be loved in the first place. Naomi Carter learned that truth beneath the golden chandeliers of the Whitmore Grand Hotel, standing alone in a bridal suite larger than the apartment where she had grown up with her mother and younger brother on the south side of Chicago. Outside the tall arched windows, Manhattan glittered like it had been polished for people who had never worried about rent, hospital bills, or the price of a second-hand dress. Inside, 600 guests waited behind velvet ropes and cathedral doors, whispering her name as if it were a question no one wanted answered. Naomi Carter. 26 years old. Black. Unknown. Not born into money, not raised around marble staircases or private elevators, and certainly not the kind of woman the Whitmore family had imagined standing beside Ethan Whitmore, the white billionaire heir to one of the most powerful real estate empires in America. Her wedding gown was beautiful in the way expensive things could be beautiful without being kind. Ivory satin, hand-sewn pearls, a train that spilled behind her like a river of snow. But the dress did not feel like a dream. It felt like evidence. Evidence that someone had chosen her, measured her, dressed her, and placed her exactly where they needed her to stand. Naomi stared at herself in the mirror while a stylist adjusted the final pin in her dark curls, shaping them into a soft crown around her face. Her skin glowed under the warm vanity lights, deep brown against the pale silk, and for one quiet second she looked almost regal. Then the door opened behind her, and the room temperature seemed to fall. Margaret Whitmore entered without knocking, tall, silver-haired, and wrapped in a champagne-colored suit that probably cost more than Naomi's car. Her eyes moved over Naomi from veil to shoes, not with admiration, but inspection. "Remember what you are here for," Margaret said softly, the softness making it worse. "Smile. Stand still. Do not embarrass this family." Naomi's fingers tightened around the small silver bracelet hidden beneath her lace glove. It was old, scratched, and worth almost nothing, but she had worn it for 8 years, ever since a rainy night on a back road outside New Jersey when she had pulled a stranger from a wrecked car and disappeared before the ambulance lights could fully paint her face. She had never known his name. She had never asked for a reward. Some acts of mercy were not meant to become transactions. But today, everything around her was a transaction. 30 days earlier, Ethan Whitmore's lawyers had found her at Mercy General Hospital, where she worked double shifts and slept in waiting room chairs between Caleb's appointments. Her brother's heart surgery would cost more than Naomi could earn in 10 years. Ethan needed a wife before his 35th birthday to satisfy the final condition of his grandfather's will, a strange clause demanding that the heir marry a woman of proven compassion before taking full control of Whitmore Holdings. Naomi needed a miracle with a price tag. The contract had been printed on thick cream paper, every line clean, cold, and final. 1 year of marriage. Separate rooms. Public appearances as required. No expectation of affection. No claim to love. In exchange, Caleb would receive the best cardiac care in the country. Naomi had signed her name with a steady hand because dignity did not always look like freedom. Sometimes it looked like sacrifice made in silence. Across the hotel, Ethan Whitmore stood before another mirror, adjusting his black bow tie with the precision of a man preparing for war instead of marriage. He was 34, broad-shouldered, pale-eyed, and beautiful in a distant, untouchable way, like a statue carved for a city that never learned how to feel. In the inside pocket of his tuxedo rested a burned photograph he had carried for years, the only image left from the night someone saved his life and vanished into the rain. Half the face was gone. Only a blurred outline remained, a woman's hand, a silver bracelet, and the memory of a voice telling him to stay awake. He did not know that the woman in the bridal suite wore that same bracelet beneath her glove. He did not know that the stranger he had searched for in private investigators' reports and damaged police files was about to walk toward him in white. And Naomi did not know that the man waiting at the altar had already decided to punish her for a crime she had never committed, becoming the wife he never wanted. The ceremony began with music so gentle it almost sounded like forgiveness, though no one in the room had come to forgive anything. Naomi Carter walked down the aisle beneath arches of white roses and crystal light, her arm resting lightly on the sleeve of Mr. Paul Bennett, the hospital chaplain who had volunteered to give her away when her mother could not leave Chicago and Caleb was too weak to travel. Every step carried the weight of a decision she had made in a hospital corridor that smelled of antiseptic, coffee, and fear. She remembered Caleb asleep beneath a thin blue blanket, his chest rising carefully under the monitors, his fingers curled around hers as if he were still a little boy afraid of thunderstorms. She remembered the surgeon saying there was a window of time, not large, not forgiving. She remembered looking at the estimate on the paper and feeling the world narrow into one impossible number. Then came the Whitmore lawyers with their polished shoes, quiet voices, and a solution that sounded too much like a sentence. Now, as Naomi moved through the grand ballroom transformed into a cathedral of wealth, she could feel hundreds of eyes measuring the distance between who she was and where she stood. Women in designer gowns tilted their heads. Men in black tuxedos whispered behind champagne smiles. Somewhere near the front, Vanessa Blake sat in pale gold, her blonde hair swept into a perfect knot, her expression calm enough to pass for elegance and sharp enough to cut glass. She had been the woman society expected Ethan to marry, the woman whose family owned newspapers, galleries, and enough influence to turn rumor into reputation by morning. Naomi did not look away from her. She had learned long ago that lowering her eyes only made cruel people feel taller. At the altar, Ethan Whitmore waited without warmth. His tuxedo fit him with severe perfection, his jaw clean-shaven, his pale gray eyes unreadable beneath the soft glow of the chandeliers. He did not smile when Naomi reached him. He did not offer comfort. He simply extended his hand because the moment required it. His fingers closed around hers, cool and controlled, and for one strange second Naomi felt the faintest tremor beneath his polished stillness. It vanished so quickly she wondered if she had imagined it. The minister spoke of devotion, partnership, and sacred promises, words that floated beautifully through a room where almost everyone knew this marriage had been built from paperwork and pressure. Naomi repeated her vows clearly, not because they were true yet, but because her voice belonged to her and she would not let shame steal it. Ethan repeated his with the discipline of a man reading terms aloud in a boardroom. When the rings were exchanged, Naomi noticed how his gaze dropped to her gloved wrist. The edge of her silver bracelet had slipped from beneath the lace, catching the light for one brief heartbeat. Something changed in his face, a flicker, a fracture, a memory passing too fast to name. Then applause filled the room, and the moment disappeared beneath the sound of people celebrating what they did not understand. At the reception, Ethan stood beside Naomi like a beautiful locked door. He introduced her as his wife to senators, investors, museum trustees, and old family friends, but each introduction felt carefully emptied of tenderness. Naomi smiled when expected, thanked people by name when she could, and carried herself with the quiet grace her mother had taught her in grocery store lines, church basements, and waiting rooms where dignity was sometimes the only luxury they could afford. Across the ballroom, Margaret Whitmore watched for mistakes. Vanessa watched for weakness. Ethan watched nothing, or pretended not to, though Naomi felt his attention return to her bracelet more than once. During dinner, a crystal glass chimed, and Margaret rose to toast the new couple. Her words were polished, gracious, and cold beneath the surface. She spoke of family duty, legacy, and the preservation of a name built over generations. She did not speak of love. Naomi listened without flinching. Under the table, her phone buzzed with a message from the hospital in Chicago. Caleb had been moved into preoperative care. Surgery was scheduled for the following morning. For the first time all day, her breath caught. Ethan saw it. His eyes shifted to her face, then to the phone in her hand. "Problem?" he asked quietly, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. Naomi turned the screen down against her palm. "No," she said. "A reminder of why I am here." His expression hardened, as if her honesty had offended him more than a lie would have. "Then remember the rest," he said. "This arrangement works only if you do not confuse gratitude with belonging." The words landed softly, which somehow made them heavier. Naomi looked at him, really looked at him, at the flawless suit, the controlled mouth, the loneliness hidden so deeply it had turned into cruelty. "Do not worry, Mr. Whitmore," she replied, her voice calm as candlelight. "I know the difference between being invited into a room and being welcomed in it." For the first time that evening, Ethan had no answer. By the time the last guest lifted a champagne glass and the final camera flash faded from the ballroom, Naomi Carter felt as if she had been smiling for someone else's life. Her cheeks ached, her feet burned inside satin heels that had never learned mercy, and the pearl pins in her curls pressed gently against her scalp with every careful movement. Yet she did not complain. Complaining belonged to women who expected comfort. Naomi had expected none. A private elevator carried her and Ethan Whitmore away from the reception toward the penthouse bridal suite on the top floor of the Whitmore Grand, 50 stories above the city. The elevator walls were mirrored, reflecting them from every angle: the white bride, the black tuxedo, the impossible distance between two people standing less than 2 feet apart. Ethan did not touch her. He did not speak. He watched the glowing numbers rise as if each floor were another obligation being completed. Naomi kept her hands folded at her waist, the silver bracelet hidden again beneath lace, her wedding ring cold against her finger. When the doors opened, the suite waited like a dream designed by someone who had never been lonely. White roses covered the entry table. Candles flickered inside glass hurricanes. A bottle of sparkling cider rested in a silver bucket beside 2 untouched crystal flutes, because Naomi had quietly refused champagne earlier and someone on the staff had noticed with more kindness than the family she had married into. Beyond the windows, Manhattan shimmered in gold and blue, endless and indifferent. Ethan stepped inside first, removed his cufflinks, and placed them on the marble console with a soft click that sounded final. Naomi remained near the doorway, suddenly aware of how heavy the gown felt, how long the train was, how strange it was to be dressed like a bride in a room where love had not been invited. "Your things have been moved to the east wing of my residence," Ethan said without looking at her. "My assistant will give you the schedule tomorrow. Public appearances, family events, foundation dinners. Everything is outlined." Naomi looked at the flowers, then at the untouched flutes. "And tonight?" The question was quiet. It carried no expectation of romance, only the human hope that a man might at least be gentle with the woman whose name he had taken before witnesses. Ethan turned then, his face half-shadowed by candlelight, beautiful and remote. For a moment, his eyes dropped to her wrist where the bracelet had slipped free again. Something tightened in his expression. Not tenderness. Not recognition. Something closer to pain refusing to become memory. Then his phone vibrated on the console. Vanessa Blake's name lit the screen. The room changed around it. Naomi saw the name before he could turn the phone over. She did not move. Ethan answered with his back to her, his voice low, controlled, almost tired. "I said I would come after the reception." Naomi felt the words settle into the air like frost. He ended the call, reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, and withdrew a cream envelope sealed with the Whitmore crest. He placed it on the table between them. "This contains the access cards, household instructions, and the first transfer confirmation for your brother's care," he said. "The surgery team has been paid in full." For 1 second, Naomi forgot the candles, the roses, the woman on the phone. Caleb. Paid in full. Her brother would have a chance to live. Relief rose so quickly it almost broke her composure. She pressed her fingers against the envelope but did not pick it up. "Thank you," she said, because gratitude was not weakness when it was honest. Ethan's jaw hardened. "Do not thank me. This is not kindness. It is compliance." Naomi lifted her eyes to his. "You are very careful not to sound human." The words struck something. She saw it, a brief fracture in the cold. But he covered it with cruelty polished smooth. Do not mistake my silence for kindness, Mrs. Whitmore. This marriage is a transaction. Nothing more. Then he walked toward the door. The candles moved in the draft as he opened it. Naomi stood in the center of the bridal suite, surrounded by flowers chosen by strangers, wearing a ring given without love, holding proof that her brother might survive because she had agreed to become invisible. At the threshold, Ethan paused, but he did not turn around. Do not wait up, he said. The door closed softly behind him. Softly was worse. A slam would have given her something to fight. Silence gave her only herself. Naomi remained standing until the elevator chimed somewhere beyond the hall. Only then did she remove her veil. She laid it across the back of a chair as carefully as if it belonged to another woman, then pulled the pins from her curls one by one. The city watched through the glass. The roses breathed their expensive perfume into the room. Her phone buzzed with a hospital update. Caleb was stable and resting before surgery. Naomi pressed the screen to her chest and finally sat on the edge of the enormous bed she would not sleep in. The first tear fell without permission, then another, quiet and hot against her skin. She did not cry because she loved Ethan Whitmore. She cried because the world had asked her to trade her loneliness for her brother's heartbeat, and she had done it. By midnight, the candles had burned low, the sparkling cider had gone warm, and Naomi Carter understood that some rooms could be filled with flowers and still feel like a grave for every dream a woman had been brave enough to bury. Morning arrived without mercy, pale and clean over Manhattan, as if the city had not watched Naomi Carter spend her first night as a wife sitting awake beside untouched flowers. By 6 o'clock, she had washed her face, folded the wedding gown with careful hands, and changed into a simple navy dress delivered by the hotel staff. The dress fit perfectly, which made her wonder how many details of her life had been measured before she ever agreed to this marriage. On the table, the cream envelope remained open. Inside were access cards, household rules, a schedule of public obligations, and the hospital confirmation showing Caleb's surgery paid in full. Naomi read that line 3 times. Paid in full. Those words held more tenderness than anything Ethan Whitmore had said to her. At 7:15, a black town car carried her through the city toward the Whitmore residence on the Upper East Side, a limestone mansion behind iron gates and trimmed hedges that looked too perfect to have ever known laughter. The driver was polite but silent. Naomi watched New York pass in flashes of glass towers, coffee carts, school buses, and people walking quickly with paper cups in their hands. She thought of Chicago, of her mother waiting by the phone, of Caleb being wheeled towards surgery beneath fluorescent lights. She wanted to be there. Instead, she was being delivered to a house where her name had changed faster than her heart could understand. The mansion doors opened before she reached them. A house manager named Mrs. Alvarez greeted her with professional warmth, the first honest kindness Naomi had felt since the chaplain squeezed her hand before the aisle. "Welcome, Mrs. Whitmore," she said. The title sounded strange, almost borrowed. Naomi thanked her and stepped inside. The foyer rose 3 stories high, all marble, oil portraits, and silence polished until it shone. A grand staircase curved upward like something from an old movie, but there was no music, no warmth, no sign that a family lived there beyond the weight of its own history. Margaret Whitmore stood near the drawing room doors with a cup of tea in her hand. She did not ask how Naomi had slept. She did not mention Ethan. Her gaze moved over the navy dress, the modest earrings, the silver bracelet Naomi had chosen not to hide that morning. "Breakfast is at 8, Margaret said. Eleanor dislikes tardiness. Ethan has already gone to the office." Naomi absorbed the sentence without blinking. Of course he had. A man who could leave a bride alone beneath candles could easily leave a wife alone at breakfast. "I will be on time," Naomi replied. "See that you are," Margaret said, then turned away as if Naomi were a staff appointment she had confirmed and dismissed. The East Wing suite assigned to Naomi was beautiful in the same cold language as the bridal room. Cream walls, tall windows, a bed dressed in white linen, a writing desk overlooking the garden, and a closet filled with clothes she had not chosen. Everything was expensive. Nothing was personal. On the dresser sat a framed schedule for the week: foundation luncheon, family portrait, charity board meeting, press brunch. Her life had been arranged into polite boxes. Naomi placed her old overnight bag on the bed. It looked small there, almost embarrassed. She opened it and removed the only things that were truly hers: a worn Bible from her mother, Caleb's childhood baseball card, a small bottle of lavender lotion, and a folder of hospital documents she had carried for months. She set them on the desk like quiet proof that she existed before the Whitmores renamed her. At breakfast, Eleanor Whitmore sat at the head of the table, 82 years old, silver hair pinned neatly, eyes sharper than anyone had warned Naomi to expect. Unlike Margaret, Eleanor did not inspect Naomi like an error. She studied her like a question. "So," Eleanor said, lifting her coffee. "You are the young woman my grandson married because my late husband wrote a will more dramatic than a courtroom novel." Naomi almost smiled. "That seems to be the official version." Eleanor's mouth twitched. Margaret stiffened. Before anyone could respond, a footman entered with a silver tray holding the morning papers. The headline on the society page was impossible to miss: Ethan Whitmore seen leaving reception with Vanessa Blake hours after wedding. Beneath it was a glossy photograph of Ethan stepping into a car beside Vanessa, his hand near her back, his face turned away from the camera. The room went very still. Margaret reached for the paper, but Eleanor was faster. She looked at the image, then at Naomi. Naomi felt the old humiliation rise, hot and familiar, but she did not lower her eyes. "Would you like me to pretend I did not see it?" she asked softly. Eleanor held her gaze for a long moment. "No," she said. "I would like you to remember it." Margaret's cup touched its saucer with a sharp sound. "Mother." Eleanor ignored her. "A house like this teaches women to swallow disrespect and call it grace. Do not learn that lesson too well." Naomi's fingers tightened around her napkin, not from weakness, but from the shock of being seen. Before she could answer, her phone vibrated beside her plate. A message from Mercy General appeared on the screen. "Caleb Carter is in recovery. Procedure successful." Naomi closed her eyes for 1 second, and the breath she had been holding since yesterday finally left her body. When she opened them, Eleanor was watching. "Good news?" the old woman asked. Naomi nodded, her voice nearly breaking but still steady. "My brother made it through surgery." For the first time that morning, the mansion felt less like a cage and more like a place where one small light had survived. But across the table, Margaret's expression hardened, and somewhere downtown, Ethan Whitmore was about to learn that the wife he had abandoned had begun her first day in his family home not by falling apart, but by standing straighter than anyone expected. By the third day, Naomi Carter had learned that the Whitmore mansion did not sleep, it simply lowered its voice. At dawn, gardeners moved through the hedges with silver shears. At 7, staff crossed marble floors without making a sound. At 8, Margaret Whitmore reviewed seating charts, guest lists, and reputation risks as if affection were a department she had outsourced years ago. Ethan came and went before breakfast, returning long after dinner, leaving behind only the scent of expensive cologne in hallways and headlines that pretended his absence was power. Naomi did not chase him. She did not ask where he had been. She did not give the household the pleasure of watching her wait by windows. Instead, she built a small routine inside the cold architecture of her new life. She called her mother every morning for updates on Caleb, who was recovering slowly but steadily in Chicago. She walked with Eleanor through the garden when the old woman's knees allowed it. She learned the names of the staff, thanked them without performance, and refused to let anyone carry a tray she could carry herself. Small things. Quiet things. But in a house trained to worship status, kindness became a disturbance. On Thursday afternoon, Mrs. Alvarez found Naomi in the library, surrounded by folders from the Whitmore Foundation. Eleanor had asked her to review the guest list for the upcoming charity gala, but Naomi had noticed something strange in the donation reports. Numbers that should have matched did not. A children's cardiac program in Queens had received less than half the amount publicly announced. A clinic in Newark had been listed as fully funded, though Naomi recognized its name from a hospital bulletin requesting emergency supplies. 3 invoices carried the same vendor address, a suite number in Midtown connected to a boutique event company owned by Vanessa Blake's cousin. Naomi sat very still as the pattern unfolded beneath her fingers. Before life had narrowed around Caleb's illness, she had studied healthcare administration at a community college in Illinois. She knew hospital billing codes, grant language, and the quiet ways money could disappear behind polished words. By midnight, the library lamps burned low, and rain tapped against the windows like a patient warning. Naomi had spread the files across the long mahogany table, her navy cardigan pulled over her dress, her curls pinned loosely at the back of her neck. She was comparing a transfer receipt to a vendor contract when the library door opened. Ethan stood there in a dark suit, his tie loosened, his face marked by the exhaustion of a man who refused to admit he was tired. For a moment, he said nothing. His eyes moved from the papers to Naomi, then to the silver bracelet resting against her wrist. "Why are you going through foundation records?" he asked. Naomi did not startle. She placed one finger on the invoice before her. "Because someone is using sick children as decoration for stolen money." His expression closed instantly. "Careful." "I am being careful," she said. "That is why I have not said this at breakfast." Ethan stepped into the room, the door closing softly behind him. "You have been in this family for 3 days. Do not mistake access for authority." Naomi looked up at him then, calm, steady, and tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "And you have been in this family your whole life. Do not mistake inheritance for vision." The words landed between them with dangerous precision. Ethan's jaw tightened. "If this is about Vanessa, stop now." Naomi almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. It became about Vanessa when her cousin's company appeared on 3 inflated invoices tied to medical grants that never reached the hospitals. "You do not know what you are reading." "I know exactly what I am reading." Her voice remained soft, which made it harder to dismiss. "I have spent years sitting across from billing departments, insurance offices, charity boards, and hospital administrators. People like your family announce donations. Families like mine wait to see if the money actually arrives." Something flickered in Ethan's eyes, not guilt, not yet, but the first uncomfortable edge of doubt. He picked up one of the folders, scanned the page, and set it down too quickly. "Vanessa has supported this foundation for years. Then she should welcome transparency." His mouth hardened. "You are making accusations that could damage people." Naomi rose slowly, gathering the papers into a neat stack. "No, Ethan. The damage has already been done. I am pointing to the place where someone covered it with flowers." The rain thickened against the glass. For the first time since their wedding, they stood facing each other without an audience, without lawyers. Without Margaret's judgment or Vanessa's smile between them. Ethan looked at Naomi as if trying to fit her into the small, convenient story he had written about her and failing. She took the top folder and held it out to him. "You do not have to love me, Mr. Whitmore. You do not even have to like me. But do not insult the truth just because it came from someone you were taught to look down on." Ethan did not take the folder at first. His eyes dropped again to the bracelet, and the burned photograph in his jacket pocket seemed suddenly heavier than before. When he finally reached for the papers, his fingers brushed the edge of hers for less than a second. Nothing romantic passed between them. Only recognition's shadow, standing far away in the rain, waiting for one of them to turn around. The Whitmore Foundation Gala arrived on a Friday evening wrapped in crystal light, white orchids, and the kind of music wealthy people chose when they wanted generosity to sound expensive. The grand ballroom of the Whitmore Grand had been transformed again, but this time Naomi Carter did not enter as a bride. She entered as Mrs. Whitmore, in a midnight blue gown with long sleeves, a modest neckline, and a quiet elegance that made several conversations slow as she passed. Her curls were swept to one side, her silver bracelet visible at her wrist, and her wedding ring resting like a question on her hand. Ethan walked beside her, close enough for photographs, distant enough for truth. Since the night in the library, he had not apologized. He had not admitted she might be right. But he had taken the folder, and Naomi had seen the change in him, small but real, like a locked room with a light under the door. Across the ballroom, Vanessa Blake smiled as if she owned the evening. She wore white, not bridal white, but something sharper, a color chosen to remind people who they had expected to see beside Ethan. She moved from donor to donor with practiced warmth, touching arms, laughing softly, collecting admiration like jewelry. Margaret watched from near the stage, her expression composed, though her eyes followed Naomi with a warning that needed no words. Eleanor sat at the head table, wrapped in emerald silk, tapping one finger against her cane as if waiting for a play to reveal its villain. Naomi tried to focus on the Children's Hospital representatives seated near the front, the doctors from Queens, the clinic directors from Newark, the people whose work mattered more than the gowns and gossip surrounding them. She had spent the afternoon confirming what she could without making accusations too soon. The numbers were worse than she feared. Money had been promised publicly, redirected quietly, and hidden beneath event expenses polished with luxury language. When Ethan arrived at their table, his face was controlled, but his eyes were restless. "Do not confront anyone tonight," he said under his breath. Naomi looked at the stage, where the foundation logo glowed in soft gold. "I was not planning to." "Vanessa knows you have been asking questions." "Then Vanessa should have better answers." Ethan's jaw tightened, but before he could reply, the lights dimmed and Margaret stepped onto the stage. Her speech was graceful, full of legacy, compassion, and the Whitmore duty to serve. Applause rose politely. Then Vanessa joined her, accepting the microphone with a smile that made Naomi's skin go cold. "Before we celebrate tonight's generous pledges," Vanessa said, "I believe the foundation owes its donors transparency." A murmur moved through the room. Ethan went still. Naomi did not. On the large screen behind Vanessa, documents appeared one after another: Naomi's marriage contract, selected pages from hospital payment records, and edited foundation files arranged to suggest that Naomi had married Ethan to gain access to charitable funds. Gasps traveled across the ballroom like wind over glass. Someone whispered contract wife. Someone else said opportunist. Margaret's face drained of color, not from sympathy, but from scandal. Vanessa lowered her voice into something almost tender. "It pains me to say this, but Mrs. Whitmore has been reviewing confidential records without authorization. Given her personal financial circumstances, we must ask whether her interest in the foundation is truly charitable." The room turned toward Naomi. Hundreds of eyes. Cameras lifting. Phones glowing. For one breath, the old Naomi from hospital corridors and overdue bills felt the familiar sting of being judged by people who knew the price of everything and the cost of nothing. Ethan stood beside her, silent. Too silent. Naomi looked at him, waiting for one word, one sign that the man who had seen the invoices, the man who had held the truth in his own hands, would not let her stand alone again. His face was pale, his eyes fixed on the screen, shocked by how perfectly the lie had been built. But shock still looked like abandonment when a woman was drowning in public. Naomi rose from her chair. The ballroom quieted as she walked toward the stage, each step measured, her gown moving like dark water around her. Vanessa's smile faltered only slightly. Naomi did not reach for the microphone at first. She removed her wedding ring and placed it gently on the podium. The small sound carried farther than it should have. Then she looked at Ethan, not with hatred, Not even with tears, but with the calm of a woman who had finally found the edge of her own silence. "A ring can make me your wife, Ethan," she said, her voice clear enough for the entire ballroom to hear. "But silence made me your stranger." No one moved. Naomi turned to the audience. "I did review the foundation records. I did it because children's clinics were promised help they never received. I did it because families like mine do not attend galas when money disappears. They sit in waiting rooms and pray the lights stay on." Vanessa reached for the microphone, but Eleanor's cane struck the floor once, sharp and final. Naomi stepped back from the podium, leaving the ring beneath the lights. She did not defend her poverty. She did not beg for belief. She walked out of the ballroom with her head high, while behind her, Ethan Whitmore stared at the ring she had left behind and understood, too late, that the most expensive room in New York had just witnessed the moment his wife stopped waiting to be protected. Naomi Carter did not return to the Whitmore mansion that night. She took a cab from the side entrance of the hotel while the gala continued behind walls of music, flowers, and damage control. The driver asked for an address, and for one tired second Naomi had none. The mansion was not home. The bridal suite had never been home. Chicago was too far, and Caleb was still recovering beneath hospital lights she could only reach by phone. So she gave the driver the name of a small extended-stay hotel near Mercy General's New York Partner Hospital, the place where she had once slept in a chair during Caleb's first consultation. It was not elegant. It was not protected by gates. But when the door closed behind her, the silence belonged to her. Back at the Whitmore Grand, Ethan stood in the emptying ballroom with Naomi's ring in his palm. The gold was warm from the stage lights, but his hand felt cold around it. Reporters had been escorted out. Donors had been reassured. Vanessa had vanished behind a circle of lawyers and friends who suddenly looked less certain of her innocence. Margaret was speaking sharply to the public relations team near the entrance, trying to turn humiliation into strategy. Eleanor remained seated at the head table, watching Ethan with the kind of disappointment that did not need volume. "You had the folder," she said when he approached. Ethan closed his fingers over the ring. "I was trying to understand what happened." "No," Eleanor said. "You were trying to decide whether truth deserved protection when it came from a woman you had already chosen not to respect." The words did not strike loudly. They entered quietly and stayed. Ethan left the ballroom without answering. By midnight, he was in his private office on the 47th floor of Whitmore Holdings, the city spread beneath him like a kingdom he suddenly did not deserve. He placed Naomi's ring beside the foundation folder and called Daniel Price, the firm's chief forensic accountant, a man who had worked for the Whitmores for 20 years and feared Eleanor more than any board of directors. "I want every transaction tied to the children's medical grants reviewed tonight," Ethan said. "No summaries. No filters. Names, accounts, vendors, approvals." Daniel hesitated only once. "Including Miss Blake's committees?" Ethan looked at the ring. "Especially those." The first report arrived at 2:17 in the morning. The second at 3:40. By sunrise, the pattern was no longer a suspicion. It was a map. Inflated vendor contracts. Redirected donations. Shell consulting fees routed through companies connected to Vanessa's cousin, then to a private trust under a name Ethan recognized from old society pages. Vanessa had not merely lied. She had built a cathedral of charity around theft and taught everyone to admire the stained glass. Ethan read until the words blurred. Then Daniel sent one final attachment with a note, "You should see this yourself." It was not a financial document. It was an archived insurance file from 8 years earlier, linked through an old foundation reimbursement for emergency medical transport after Ethan's accident on a rain-soaked road outside New Jersey. Ethan's breath slowed as he opened it. The accident he remembered only in fragments: rain against glass, the smell of gasoline, a woman's voice telling him to keep his eyes open, a silver bracelet flashing under emergency lights. He had searched for her for years. Vanessa had once claimed her family helped bury the record to protect him from press attention. He had believed her because grief made convenient lies sound like mercy. The file contained a damaged photograph recovered from a traffic camera near the scene. Ethan had carried a burned copy of it in his jacket for years, the woman's face half lost to shadow and firelight. But this scan was clearer. Not perfect, but enough. A young black woman kneeling beside the open car door, rain flattening her curls, one hand pressed to the stranger's shoulder, the other wrist circled by a scratched silver bracelet. Ethan stood so quickly his chair rolled back against the wall. He pulled the old photograph from his inside pocket and laid it beside the screen. The bracelet matched. The curve of the hand matched. The quiet courage in the posture matched the woman who had stood in his library and told him not to insult the truth. Naomi. The name left him like a confession. The woman he had abandoned beneath wedding flowers was the same woman who had saved his life and disappeared before he could turn gratitude into debt. The woman he had accused of wanting his money had once walked away from any reward at all. Ethan sat down slowly, not because his body failed him, but because the version of himself he had trusted could no longer stand. Morning light entered the office, pale and unforgiving. His phone showed 12 missed calls from Margaret, 6 from Vanessa, and none from Naomi. That absence hurt more than accusation. He picked up Naomi's ring and closed it in his palm, not as a claim, but as evidence of what he had broken. For the first time in years, Ethan Whitmore did not reach for control. He reached for the truth, and the truth had Naomi Carter's face. Rain returned to New York that evening, soft at first, then steady enough to turn the hospital windows silver. Naomi Carter sat beside Caleb's bed at Mercy General's partner wing, watching her brother sleep beneath a navy blanket with the Yankees game muted on the television above him. His color was better. The surgeon had smiled during rounds. Her mother had cried over the phone for 10 full minutes, whispering prayers between every breath. For the first time in months, Naomi allowed herself to believe that tomorrow might not arrive carrying bad news. She had changed out of the gala gown and into dark jeans, a cream sweater, and sneakers bought from a drugstore 2 blocks away. Her curls were pulled back loosely, her face bare, her wedding ring absent. The silver bracelet remained. It had survived rain, debt, hospital chairs, and now the Whitmore name. Caleb stirred and opened his eyes. "You look tired," he murmured. Naomi smiled and brushed a curl from his forehead. "That is because you keep making dramatic medical history." He gave a weak laugh, then glanced toward the window. "Is he coming?" Naomi's hand stilled. Caleb was young, but illness had taught him to read rooms too carefully. "I do not know," she said. "And I am not waiting." The words were true, but when the nurse stepped in 20 minutes later and said Mr. Whitmore was asking permission to visit, Naomi felt the air change anyway. She looked at Caleb, then at the rain sliding down the glass. "Tell him I will meet him." "Downstairs," she said. Ethan Whitmore stood outside the hospital entrance without an umbrella, his black overcoat darkened by rain, his hair no longer perfect, his face stripped of the cold polish that had once made him look untouchable. There were no bodyguards beside him. No driver waiting at the curb with the door open. No assistant holding a phone. Just a man beneath the hospital lights, holding a small velvet box in one hand and a folder in the other. Naomi stopped beneath the awning, dry while he remained in the rain. The distance between them was only a few feet. It felt like the length of their entire marriage. "Caleb is resting," she said. "If you came to confirm the surgery was successful, it was." Ethan looked at her as if every rehearsed sentence had failed him. "I came because I know." Naomi's expression did not change. "Know what?" He opened the folder with careful hands. Inside was the restored accident photograph, printed clearly enough for the truth to breathe. Naomi saw the image and went still. The rain, the road, the open car door, her younger self leaning toward a man whose face she had never seen clearly. her bracelet catching the emergency lights. A memory she had folded away because survival had demanded other priorities. Ethan's voice lowered. It was you. Naomi looked from the photograph to him. I never knew your name. I spent 8 years trying to find yours. The sentence might have been beautiful if he had not spent the last week proving how little finding her had mattered once she stood in front of him. Naomi's eyes softened for 1 second, then steadied. You found me, Ethan. You just did not recognize me without a mystery attached. The words moved through him with visible force. He closed the folder. Vanessa hid the records. She helped redirect the foundation money. Daniel has the accounts, the approvals, everything. By tomorrow morning, the board will have it too. She will not touch another dollar meant for a hospital. Good, Naomi said. Those children deserve better. So did you. The rain fell harder, blurring the city behind him. Ethan opened the velvet box. Inside was her wedding ring, the same one she had left. Beneath the ballroom lights. He did not step closer. He did not offer it like a claim. He held it like a confession. I do not expect you to put this back on, he said. I do not expect forgiveness because I finally discovered the truth. I should have protected you before the proof became convenient. I should have believed you when belief cost me something. Naomi's throat tightened, but she did not let tears speak for her. An apology after damage is not the same as honor before it. I know. His voice broke only at the edge, not dramatically, not for pity, but because the truth had finally found a place inside him. I was cruel because it was easier than being afraid. I let Vanessa's lies fit the story I wanted about you, because if you were only a contract, I did not have to feel responsible for the way I treated you. Naomi stepped out from beneath the awning. Rain touched her hair, her sweater, her face. She stood in the same weather that had once carried him back to life. I do not need you to cry for what you did, she said quietly. I need you to become someone who would never do it again. Ethan lowered the ring box. Tell me how. Start by telling the truth when it costs you your image. Return every dollar. Apologize publicly without making yourself the victim. And understand this, Ethan. If I ever come back, it will not be because your name is powerful. It will be because your character finally is. For a long moment, he could only look at her. Then he nodded, slow and solemn, as if receiving a sentence he deserved. Naomi turned back toward the hospital doors. Before she entered, she paused, not looking over her shoulder. Caleb likes baseball, she said. If you visit him someday, come as yourself. Not as a Whitmore. Then she walked inside, leaving Ethan in the rain with the ring, the photograph, and the first honest instructions he had ever been given on how to become worthy of the woman he had already lost.